How long would Cartman's prison sentence be? While he was initially charged and sentenced for a hate crime, if you remember the episode, it was actually overturned at the end of the episode, so therefore, he's not guilty of this. So I couldn't find much on vigilantism. I think it's a crime in many places, but I don't know if it's a crime in Colorado, as I couldn't find anything, so I guess he's innocent. So you may remember that Cartman intentionally gave Kyle AIDS as a way to get back at him for Kyle thinking the whole situation was funny. And upon doing research into this, there are certain areas where it is illegal to transmit HIV to people, and I also discovered that this is a very controversial topic, and I'm just going to leave it alone and not talk about it anymore, so let's just say he's not guilty. Now, I'm referencing the South Park fandom Wikipedia for this list, and they have enforced cannibalism on here, obviously referring to when he made Scott Tenorman eat his own parents. But interestingly enough, cannibalism technically isn't illegal in the United States as long as you can somehow get human meat legally. And during my research, I couldn't find anything about the legality of forcing someone else to be a cannibal, so this one is kind of just a question mark. When he consumes an unholy amount of Vagisil without paying for it in the shop, this would be considered a petty theft, therefore only 6 months. Cartman was just suing everyone for no reason, and this would be considered contempt of court, which gives you a 6-month sentence. This one is also kind of slander, as he said a lot of false things about Wendy in order to try to get her in trouble, and this would give him a 6-month sentence. In Cow Days, Cartman suffers a severe concussion and believes he is a Vietnamese prostitute. He does the things that prostitutes do. In Colorado, this carries a max sentence of 6 months. He technically committed fraud whenever he won the gift certificate after pretending to be handicapped in the Special Olympics. Therefore, this would be considered petty fraud, and he would receive about 6 months. You may remember Cartman performing a liposuction surgery on Butters, and obviously he did not have a license, therefore this carries a sentence of 1 year. In Scott Tenorman Must Die, Cartman stole the dead bodies of Mr. and Mrs. Tenorman from the crime scene. This carries with it a 1-year sentence in the county jail. Obviously, he did not obtain that firearm legally, which carries a 1-year max sentence. So grave robbing implies they are stealing things of value from a grave, and in this situation, they just took Kyle's grandma. However, this implies another charge of abuse of a corpse, which carries with it a 1-year sentence. For vandalism, there's obviously a ton of examples of this, but we're going to give him the benefit of the doubt and say that he's only vandalized between $750 and $1,000, which classifies as a Class 1 misdemeanor and carries a 1.5-year sentence. He has taken his mother's credit card several times to pay for things, and technically speaking, this would be classified as credit fraud. Credit fraud carries a 1.5-year sentence. We need to respect his authority, of course, and because of that, he will get a 1.5-year sentence. This one was kind of hard because I'm not sure if it's technically illegal to talk someone into doing this, but Cartman has done that, and based on some other cases I found, people have been sentenced to about 1.5 years for this. This is seen in Crack Baby Athletic Association, however, it would be considered minor or no injury, therefore he would only get 1.5 years. Now, he is shown to be in possession of crack cocaine in the episode Crack Baby Athletic Association, but most likely this is a misdemeanor amount, so this would carry with it a 1.5-year sentence in the county jail. Now, Cartman has developed a habit of hitting various animals with a stick and just being generally abusive towards animals, but because it's not severe abuse, it likely would fall under a misdemeanor animal abuse charge, which carries with it a 1.5-year sentence, as well as 1-year mandatory parole. Yes, hitchhiking is actually illegal in Colorado. Not only is it illegal, it carries a 2-year maximum sentence, which is kind of insane, but yeah. When he becomes the leader of his own church, he tells his followers that they are paying to support the church, but in fact, he was just taking the money and using it on himself. This is embezzlement, and it carries a 3-year sentence. He ran from the police in his Ford Bronco in a very, very slow speed chase, and this would give him 3 years. Threatening with a deadly weapon carries a 3-year max sentence. Cartman breaks into a lot of places, most notably Kyle's room, and breaking and entering carries a sentence of 6 years. He has taken his mother's credit card. Identity theft carries a 6-year sentence. For manslaughter, he accidentally murdered Kenny whenever he was having hallucinations on Ritalin, and in Colorado, manslaughter carries a maximum 6-year sentence. He's done this several times, but most distinctly he did it to Captain Hindsight in Coon and Friends, and this carries with it a 6-year prison sentence as well as 3 years of mandatory parole. Yes, he did in fact force sexual acts upon Butters, and this would be considered sexual assault without force, which carries an 8-year prison sentence, and he would have to become a registered sex offender. Now, I know that technically he wasn't the only one to start the fire, as it was him, Stan, Kyle, and Kenny that did it all together, but for this one we're just assuming it's just him, and this carries a sentence of 12 years. Not too sure about the legality of this one since it was on a racetrack, but he did in fact cause a hit and run that killed people, therefore he would be served a 12-year sentence. Despite being one himself, he did technically produce and possess cheese pizza. If you don't know what I mean when I say cheese pizza, just look at the initials and I'm sure you'll figure it out. But because he was technically producing the cheese pizza, this gives him a 12-year sentence as well as 3 years of mandatory parole. He tries to rob Kyle of his quote-unquote Jew gold that he has around his neck. Armed robbery carries a 16-year max sentence. Cartman has obviously stolen a ton of things over the years, and I know I said I wouldn't do this, but for this one I decided to just lump all the crimes together and make it one big theft charge, so this would give him a max sentence of 24 years. There are several examples of this, most of them with Butters, and the main one I think of is in Casa Bonita when he locks him in the bomb shelter. This carries with it a maximum sentence of 24 years. Of course, there are tons of examples of this, but the one that would get him the most time is when he attacks Mintberry Crunch in the Coon and Friends trilogy. This is because he uses those finger blades, and in my opinion, that constitutes as a deadly weapon, and assault with a deadly weapon carries a maximum sentence of 32 years. Now, this actually took place in Somalia, and obviously the laws are different there, so I couldn't find anything specific on the maximum sentencing or anything like that. But I did find a case in which a man from Somalia was charged with piracy and sentenced to 33 years, so that's what I'm gonna do. Once again, he has done this many times. The first one I think of is when he tried to kill Kyle with a wiffle bat, obviously unsuccessfully, and in Colorado, attempted murder carries a max sentence of 48 years. The most obvious example of this is the fact that he intentionally got Scott Tenorman's parents killed. Now, I couldn't find much information on how exactly Colorado would rule this, but in my mind, this is similar to a murder for hire plot, and in that case, Cartman would be charged with first-degree murder, giving him a life sentence. Now, there are actually quite a few examples of Cartman murdering someone, but all of them are a little bit iffy as to whether or not it could be considered actual murder, but the one that you can argue is in The Last of the Mohicans when he clearly murders some Mexicans. So, in Colorado, first-degree murder carries a life sentence. When he leads the South to a victory in the new Civil War, his troops can be seen doing everything from looting to pillaging to attacking civilians, all of which are war crimes. Therefore, this would be classified as a federal crime, and he would likely be sentenced to death. So, Cartman committed the genocide of many different groups, including Jews and hippies, while riding on the back of Cthulhu. The death penalty has been abolished in Colorado, but because this is such a severe crime, this would likely be a federal charge, and there is a federal death penalty for circumstances like this. So most likely, he would be receiving the death penalty. There are several examples of this, including taking an entire P.F. Chang's hostage, as well as planting bombs on a hospital, and obviously, because this is terrorism, this would be considered a federal crime, giving him most likely the death penalty. And on account of being found guilty of each and every single one of these charges, you are hereby sentenced to 3 federal death penalties, 2 life sentences, 273 years in prison or jail, 7 years of mandatory parole, and you have to become a registered sex offender.
Name?
The worst crime that Cartman has committed by far is leaving his internet browsing history completely exposed and unprotected.